Dawn of Man is an excellent prehistoric city building game where you have to help a primitive tribe of hairy-assed humans survive from the Stone Age all the way through to the Iron Age, preferably without being trampled by mammoths or coshed over the head and dragged away by raiders along the way. I'm going to tell you all about it today, but if you'd like to see my entire first playthrough in all its glory where I was learning the game, then just click the link down below. Dawn of Man's main game mode sees you begin with a bunch of primitive plebs way back in the Paleolithic era, their classic period of hunter-gathering of human history, where guess what? If you want something, you're gonna have to either go out and pick it up off the floor, or kill it to wear and or eat it. The game plays along in real time, and as the seasons change, so will the availability of food and resources. Your job is to control your peasants, tell them to go and pick stuff up and make stuff out of it, and also, most importantly, at this stage, to find food and shelter, enough food to last through the long, cold, harsh winters. But the game isn't just about killing and eating everything that runs around on four legs. You're also going to have to gather resources to develop tools, and build better tools through researching metalworking later on. Also weapons to defend yourself, so you can better hunt mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses, and defend yourself against raiders that will come in and try and kill you and steal your stuff. Well, okay, they're really just interested in killing you, but hey, that's bad enough. Oh, and yes, I did mention research as well. But hang on, Mark, I hear you say. I don't remember reading of any history lessons about people sitting around in the Paleolithic era trying to ponder the theory of gravity. Well, no, research doesn't quite work like it does in a lot of other games. In this game, you research stuff just by doing it a lot, which is ingenious. You eventually learn how to get better by doing something a lot. Who'd have thought it? I actually really like this idea. So, for example, if you chop down enough trees and gather wood, you'll get some research points to spend on researching something else. If you kill an animal for the first time, you're thinking, we now know how to kill those. You'll get some research points. And these research points that you build up through gathering and harvesting and killing and building can be spent to advance your society's technology into different ages, from the Paleolithic through the Mesolithic to the Bronze and the Iron Age, etc, etc. It's a really good system. I like it a lot. There's also a small element of trade to the game, but this isn't any sort of market economy. Occasionally, a trader will show up with a sledge full of goodies, and you can try and trade a few rocks for a goat or whatever it is that you want. But these traders know their stuff. They work on a commission basis, so you ain't gonna get any good deals over on these guys in a hurry. But they can be useful if you've got extra crap to get rid of. There's also a couple of other scenarios in the game, including a frozen northern wastes one where you get longer, harsher winters and shorter summers. That's quite cool. And another one where you just face hordes and hordes of angry barbarians coming at you all the time because you're living in a very crowded space. There's also Steam community scenarios available that you can create or download. There's also a couple of fun ones like where you get to play as a herd of mammoths and have to guide them safely across the land without being eaten on the way. And difficulty-wise, you can play normal or hardcore, and I highly recommend the hardcore mode. It's actually more fun. Basically, it means there's more raiders, the animals are more aggressive and more likely to eat your people, and you can't actually pause the game to stop and think and plan stuff out. You can play the game between 1 and 8 times speed, but you won't be able to pause the game to look over stuff. Although, don't worry, if you need to go for a slash, you can always hit the escape key and run off. Now, as the game progresses through the ages, hopefully your tribe will expand and spread out a bit. You've got to try and keep everyone happy by feeding them, making sure they've got the right clothes for the season and the weather, looking after their moral well-being, in this case, just by building a few structures and totem poles, or maybe some giant stone structure. Who knows? If you want to build Stonehenge, go for it. Oh, and later on you can discover beer as well. Beer, the cause of and solution to all life's problems. So as you progress, you'll see your settlement and your work priorities change quite a bit. At some point, you're going to develop agriculture, which is just as well, because there comes a point in the game where your population becomes too big to sustain just by hunting. No, the game doesn't have any really in-depth ecosystem where you can overhunt or overfish and then those animals are gone for good, although different types of animals do become extinct as you progress through the ages, and you'll see different ones pop up. Now, animals do respawn, but the thing is you just won't be able to hunt enough of them to feed a massive population, and that's where farming comes in. And of course, animal domestication and all that sort of stuff. It's up to you as the player to balance all this and get the workload right. Not enough people to grow and harvest all the crops? Well, you're gonna starve. Sent everyone off to go and build a massive stone monument to the gods instead of harvesting the barley? Well, you're gonna starve. Now you can micromanage everything in the game, but luckily the game's AI is pretty good and it makes it easier for you because you can set work priorities and resource limits and work zones where they gather stuff and hunt stuff or anything else, and all that works pretty well. But there are times when you definitely want to micromanage stuff. For example, don't leave the AI to let your hunters go and take down mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses. It ain't going to end well. Around about the Neolithic age, you really start to see lots of raiders coming in, so you're going to have to think about the defence of your settlement as well. Maybe build some fortifications around it, maybe develop guard towers, definitely develop weapons. But I should point out, combat isn't a big part of this game at all. In fact, it's possibly one of the weaker elements of it. So don't think this is like Age of Empires where you'll go off conquering other settlements and stuff. In fact, you don't even see enemy settlements on the map. They're just raiders come in every now and again. You get a warning and you have to rush to grab the arms and shut the gates around the settlement and fight them off. And then eventually you'll find yourself in the Iron Age. And that's where the game ends. Although it doesn't really end. You can actually play this just on and on forever. You can see how big you can expand the settlement, which will bring with it its own challenges, of course. Or then you can start again in a new different location, on a new difficulty level, and just try something else out. It's one of those games that's open-ended, and the goals are your own. So let's talk about the sounds and visuals, both of which are actually very, very basic, but pretty functional, and you know what, they fit right in. There isn't actually a lot of in-game sounds to talk about. There's a few sound effects from combat, people grunting mostly, and a few animal sounds when you're hunting them and stuff like that. And there's a storm and stuff. You don't hear a lot else, the occasional alert that pops up. It's kind of functional, kind of basic. There is a really good soundtrack. In fact, you've been listening to the one from the title screen all the way through the game. I find the sound, the music, really relaxing. It's great for a chill-out sort of mood game. And I could talk about the visuals in exactly the same way. They are basic. Let's be honest, they are basic for 2019. I do really like the way the seasons change and the settlement and the fields and everything alters to reflect the weather. But other than that, there's not a lot to talk about regarding the visuals. There are a few problems, and I've seen mostly with sprites clipping and just walking through each other. This happens a lot with domestic animals walking through the walls of your buildings, or just your villagers walking into and through each other. It's not really a problem. There is an action cam mode where you can click on a villager, an animal, a building, and it zooms right in. And that's when you notice this the most. When you're playing in the normal zoomed out settlement view mode, you don't really notice this as an issue, but it looks very obvious zoomed in, I've got to say. And now let's talk about the good and bad of the game. There isn't really a lot of bad stuff I've found in this. I think combat, as I mentioned earlier, is the weakest element. It just seems very basic. And clearly the game is not designed around being a combat game, it's been designed around you managing the settlement more. Depending on the scenario and difficulty that you're playing at, raiders will occasionally come in and try and trash your settlement. But you've got a nice little feature which you can click on a horn and it sounds an alarm and everyone rushes in from the fields, gathers up their sticks and stones and bows and rushes to one of the gates that you can try and fend them off. You can build guard towers as fortifications and your villagers will run up them if they've got a ranged weapon and try and shoot out. However, this is one of the problems I had with the game. Enemy raiders seem very adept at destroying guard towers using spears and bows. They just destroy them from outside the walls, which kind of, I don't know, it doesn't feel right. I guess it's all part of the game balance. But often I've found that not manning the towers and just fighting out in the open worked out better, especially if you outnumber the bunch of raiders coming in. But combat does often just devolve into two blobs chucking sticks and stones at each other. Your guys versus their guys, and if you go en masse, you'll probably win. You can do some clever stuff like using fortifications to break up attackers, to split them into smaller groups so you can whittle them down easier, but combat is certainly the weaker element of the game. And now, the maps are huge, and you'll probably never use the full extent of them. And whilst this isn't a problem, it does really leave a missed opportunity, because I would have loved to have seen co-op multiplayer in this. It would have been amazing having a friend playing at the other side of one of these massive maps. There's enough resources and there's certainly enough space, and it would just been kind of a fun thing to do. Also, speaking of the big maps, if you try and build a second settlement over another side of the map, maybe to go and get access to other resources, the AI cannot handle that very well at all. Even if you build all the required buildings and have all the required resources there, food, shelter, water, sticks, stones, whatever you need to build up, then the villagers, well, they just can't cope with where to go, where to store stuff. you'll find that they walk all the way from one village to do a task, and then walk all the way home to try and get fed or get some rest, even though there's facilities available there, and they'll die en route. And really they don't know where to store things in the new village or the old things, and it just doesn't work. It's something that the developers might be able to patch in, because it is just a problem with the AI, but in my playthrough, that was one of the biggest failings. But that leaves the good stuff about the game, and that is everything else. And I've got to say, I have absolutely loved playing Dawn of Man. I'm not usually a big fan of settlement management games and city builder games, but this one has a distinct charm about it. I think that is just the setting, the period of history that it's set in. It's something unique. I haven't seen any other games, unless we go back to maybe Megalomania back in the 90s. Oh my god, that was a long time ago, and that was a totally different game. That's set in this period. Adding to the charm is the fact that as your settlement progresses and you develop new technologies, you see everything change. The appearance of the houses and the buildings, they change from hide huts to round houses. You see your villagers develop better clothes and better weapons. The working practices change as well. You go from being hunter-gatherers to farmers and then defenders. And you see even early industry crop up with water mills and bread ovens. And the whole thing is very, very addictive. You think, oh, I'll just play a little bit longer. I'll just get to the Bronze Age and I'll save it there. And you suddenly find yourself playing for another 3 or 4 hours and the time just flies by. It's really, really good fun, manually taking control of hunting parties and sending them out on an expedition and just killing as many animals as you can find. The rest of the village on the AI will come round after you and butcher it and cart it all back. But you just control a little group of 4 or 5 people and just going on a hunt. It's brilliant. So overall, I can thoroughly recommend Dawn of Man. It's been an absolute joy to play. It's something that's really got its hooks into me, and I will be returning to it and playing it again in the future. Okay folks, don't forget to go and watch my Let's Play series if you'd like to watch my entire first playthrough as I learnt the game. Just check the links down below, and keep your eyes open in the next couple of days for my Dawn of Man tips video, where I'll be giving all the simple bits of advice that I've learned through playing the game that made my life a lot easier and made the game a lot more enjoyable. Thanks for watching, let me know what you think down in the comments, and I'll catch you again on the next one.